For as much as I love Batman, there are some stories where the Caped Crusader is revealed to be just a horrible person. Here are the top 10 worst Batman stories of all time. First, All-Star Batman and Robin the Boy Wonder is like the black sheep in Batman's world of comics. But it's definitely not what you would call a fan favorite. In this story, Batman isn't the hero we all know and love. He's more like a brutal, crude guy who does some seriously messed up things. First off, the way Batman treats Robin is just wrong. The novel tries to reimagine the Batman and Robin team-up origin story, but in this one, Batman literally kidnaps Dick Grayson after his parents die. He even slaps Robin across the face and justifies it by saying, "Because I'm goddamn Batman." And if you think that's bad, he goes on to have some woohoo time with Black Canary in a really disturbing setting, surrounded by burning corpses. Oh, and how could I forget the scene where Batman literally forced Robin to eat rats? It's like, there was nothing about Bruce in this story that was heroic. Fans despised this version of Batman, which led to the series being canceled before it was even finished. Now, on the flip side, you could see it as a satire of Batman, where Miller took Bruce Wayne's psychological trauma and logically resulting mental personality disorders and took them to their obvious conclusion. It was the Batman no one ever wanted to admit could be plausible if he wasn't a comic book character with decades of history and fan expectations. Next, let's talk The Dark Knight Strikes Again, a sequel to the highly praised Dark Knight Returns, which didn't quite live up to the hype. Written by Frank Miller, it continued the story of an older Batman coming out of hiding. This time, Batman opposes Lex Luthor's oppressive rule over a dystopian America. But the catch is that the sequel did not capture the same magic as its predecessor. Instead of delivering a compelling story, it felt like a watered-down version of Miller's gritty style. Batman's character turned harsher, Dick Grayson became a cruel, twisted version of the Joker, and Kari Kelly was awkwardly forced into a Catgirl role, not to mention the whole comic's weird art style. So the problem is that The Dark Knight Strikes Again lacked the depth and emotional punch of the original. It seemed more like a cash grab than a meaningful continuation. The sequel failed to justify its existence beyond Miller just trying to keep the story going for the paycheck. If you're enjoying this video so far, please support the channel by pressing like, subscribing to Top 10 Nerd, and ringing that notification bell. Kevin Smith, a filmmaker who's deep into superhero stuff, took a swing at Batman with the Widening Guy storyline, but it totally missed its mark. This unfinished story feels way off. It's got Batman making pals with this new vigilante named Baphomet while juggling this romance with an old flame Silver Cloud. And the two even get engaged, only to have her killed off by Baphomet, who's revealed to be Anomatopia, a horrible villain that Smith made up, who he just had to shove in here, which just didn't quite fit. And he got carried away with his jokes, horribly retconning a crucial moment from Batman Year One, where Smith insisted that Batman wet his pants, which just wasn't cool. Fans did not take this lightly. They felt it was a disrespect to Batman's entire legacy. The mix of the self-indulgent writing, the forced characters, and the messing with classic moments just didn't sit well with fans. Next up is The Reptilian. Garth Ennis, known for his gritty and brutal over-the-top style in comics like The Punisher, The Preacher, and The Boys, took a swing at Batman, and well, let's just say it didn't hit the mark. In fact, the writer has stated previously that he hates Batman, so why anyone would let him anywhere near a Batman story is beyond me. This relatively recent title, Reptilian, had a promise with its cool idea of a creature feature storyline, but instead of giving us an epic Batman tale, the edgelord Batman giving "because I'm Batman" vibes in every bit of dialogue is exhausting. This book was legitimately a slog to get through. It's not scary, whimsical, inspiring, or even bad on a funny level. It's just boring. The writer brought in his trademark overindulgent and satirical superheroes, but it was just too much of nothing at all. Next, Batman Odyssey is, well, let's just say, is the epitome of what the hell on earth did I just read. The story feels like a fever dream jumping from one place to another. Neil Adams, the guy behind this whole madness, takes Batman to a whole new level of strange. This hallucinogenic trip of a story begins with Batman having a moment where he almost kills somebody, forcing us to dive into this scary Bruce's psyche, where suddenly he's riding a T-Rex. Yeah, you heard me right. At one point, he even breaks the fourth wall by talking directly to readers about Alfred. This comic is a big promotion for Adam's own beliefs about a hollow earth, so it's off the wall, and it's totally out there, and it's like reading something out of a crazy fever dream. The story is all over the place, making it nearly impossible to follow. Next up, Fortunate Son. This one is a story in which Batman encounters a rock musician claiming to have a messianic connection, and Batman suspects that it's a plot to lead Gotham's youth into crime. Now, while a musical premise might have worked in the 70s, this one completely falls flat. The conflict's core is Batman's disdain for rock music, believing the genre is inherently evil, because apparently it's what he heard when his parents were killed. This rationale seems super far-fetched and completely out of sync with Batman, as this comic tries so hard to justify Batman's hatred for rock music through psychological exposition that just ends up feeling forced. The entire premise, where Batman's aversion to the genre drives the conflict, seems too far-fetched to take seriously, which brings up yet another contention as the story attempts to take itself way more seriously than it needs to. The exploration of Batman and Robin's relationship feels watered down, reduced to a cliched moral lesson. Next is Operation Blindfold. In one of the oddest Batman stories, Batman did some awful things. Imagine Batman fighting blind people. Yeah, that happened. In the comics back in the 60s, a guy called the Schemer roped in some shady folks to pretend they were all blind, and their big plan was to steal a truck full of gold. Now, the kicker is that innocent blind folks got hurt, and Batman and Robin got tossed into jail. And that's when the chaos level skyrocketed. To top it all off, the bad guys were faking it, because they weren't blind at all. And the cherry on top of this weird cake was that the story ends with Batman and the crew cracking jokes about being blind. Next up, let's talk about Batman Venom, a comic story by Dennis O'Neil and the gang, which takes a super weird twist. Now, some fans actually like this one, but I don't know. Something about Batman succumbing to substance addiction kind of violates his whole principle with his unwavering moral code. This one takes the notion that Batman, the guy who's always prepared and kicks bad guys' butts, is forced to go to extremes in order to continue his crime-fighting spree. Batman's like, I need a boost, and tries out the highly addictive but strength-boosting chemical compound called Venom to amp up his crime-fighting skills. Yeah, that's right, the same stuff Bane is on? Well, Batman takes a hit. And just as suspected, it goes downhill real quick. And the dude who usually outsmarts everyone without relying on sheer brute strength is suddenly granted said strength, turning him into a total wreck. Fans who love Batman for being all strong-willed and focused don't like seeing Bruce crash like this. Not cool, Batman. Not cool. Next up, the comic book known as Cacophony didn't hit the right notes with many Batman fans. Written by Kevin Smith, it's often remembered as one of the worst Batman stories ever. In this series, the aforementioned villain Omnitopia, his name is so hard to pronounce. He's introduced, this guy who uses sound as trouble, but the villain just doesn't work out. The humor felt off, making the Batman, the Joker, and other characters act super weird, and on top of that, the main villain's gimmick just didn't impress readers much. Now, what came after the sequel, The Widening Guy, continued the story and did not fix any of the problems of the original, making Cacophony's flaws even more glaring. While it did introduce this new sound-making villain, the Batman story wasn't music to fans' ears. Now let's take this opportunity to finally describe why Omnometopia is an absolute dumpster trash of a character. See, this dude is a villain who relies on sound as his weapon. He doesn't really talk so much, but he mimics sounds around him, so whenever a gun fires, he says bang or pow out loud. He doesn't have any superpowers. He's just good at fighting and uses stealth to surprise his enemies. His gimmick, which is mimicking sounds, kind of sound cool, but in the long run, it feels super shallow. He doesn't have a deep backstory or compelling motive like other Batman villains. He's more like a one-trick pony, relying solely on his gimmick to mimic sound. Plus, he totally lacks depths. I mean, readers don't really get to know much about him or what makes him tick. See, a great villain often has layers, motivations, or something that makes you understand them, but this dude just falls short in this regard. He just ends up feeling like a forgettable horrible bad guy with a lame name. And last on our list is Batman and Catwoman, The Trial of the Gun. This might sound like an exciting adventure, but let's dive into why some folks consider it one of the worst Batman stories ever. The story centers around Batman and Catwoman chasing around a gun that never misses its target, which sounds cool, but the problem here lies with how the characters are portrayed. See, Batman usually sticks to a strict moral code against using firearms, but in this story, he's okay with Catwoman's sudden interest in the weapon. Catwoman's character also takes a weird turn as she's shown as a big supporter of firearms, which is kind of out of sync with her usual persona. It feels like the writers didn't quite get the essence of these iconic characters. While this idea might have had potential, the way it clashes with the established traits of Batman and Catwoman left much to be desired from the story. As always, if there's a horrible Batman story that you think I've missed, feel free to let me know down in the comments. My name is AJ with Top 10 Nerd, and I'll catch you all in another video. Later, nerds.